चलो कोई नहीं, ठीक ऑन हो गई।
ये इसका यूज करते हैं दीपक, ये केबल टूटी है।
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible to all of you? Can you listen to me? Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. In today's class, we will discuss questions of parajumbles as well as out of context that has been asked in CAT 23 as well as in CAT 22. And maybe if time permits, we will also cover CAT 21 slot 1. So I'm sure just it's a discussion. Take this classes as a discussion of the question and try to figure out when you are solving these questions, what kind of errors or possibly what kind of thought processes where you find a little challenge. That is the purpose of having this class. So let's start. So we'll not discuss theory, rather we will try to solve the question, and at the last part we will try to have a recap as in what are the important points that we have to take care while solving questions of Parajumble. Till now, I think in last 5 years, Parajumble has been a constant feature in CAT. Hopefully, this year also we'll find some questions of Parajumble. But as you know, nothing is constant. So we have to prepare for all kind of situation. But again, while solving question of Parajumble, most important is to read the sentences very nicely. Read them with utmost concentration and try to get the theme. And then possibly the best way would be to link the sentence. So I think we'll start. This is the first question of CAT 23 slot 1. It's an odd one out question. So odd one out, we all understand where 5 sentences are given to you. And out of those 5 sentences, one sentence doesn't belong, or we will not be able to connect with the rest of the 4 sentences. So that is what it says. Identify the odd sentence and key in number of the sentence that as your answer. Now, typically, some of us in CAT generally can commit this mistake of not reading the directions very carefully. Always is good to read the direction. It will clarify. Don't go with the prejudices. Like in previous, I have seen some of the student who inserted the answer of odd one out as Parajumble. That is what you should not do. In this, your option should be the number of the sentence that is an odd one out. Right. So now let's read this sentences and try to figure out. So in odd one out, we will try to just identify what each and every sentence is talking about. Try to figure out the theme, and then based on that, if we can link 2 sentences, it would be great. Why? Because if you can link 2 sentences, it will be clear that that cannot be option for odd one out. So for example, let's read the first sentence in English. There's no systematic rule for the naming of numbers. After 10, we have 11 and 12, and then the teens, 13, 14, 15, and so on. So I think author is clearly talks about absence of a systematic rule for naming the numbers in English. So I think absence of rules while naming the numbers, especially in English. The focus on language, that is English. Even more confusingly, some English words invert the numbers they refer to. The word 14 puts the 4 first, even though it appears last. Again, it highlights confusion in rules. Sentence number 3, it can take children a while to learn all these words and understand that 14 is different from 40. Now, the sentence talks about the learning ability of children. Like children could take some time to learn all these words. So it talks about learning ability and time taking and learning these words where there's no rule as such. For multiple of 10, English speakers switch to a different pattern 20, 30, 40, and so on. Now, again, it talks about that there is no rule as such. If you did not know the word for 11, you would be unable to just guess it. You might come up with something like 1 teen. So, if you try to apply the rule, so obviously, sentence number 1, 2, 4, and 5 highlights the confusion and absence of systematic rule while numbering in English. While sentence number 3 clearly talks about it's going to take some time for a kid to learn all these numbers. So clearly, 1, 2, 4, 5 share a common theme. That is so much of vagueness and unclarity or absence of a rule in terms of naming the numbers. While sentence number 3 takes a little diversion, though here you can say it talks about those number, but the focus is on learning ability of a kid and the time it is going to take to learn these words. So that's why I would suggest The third sentence is an odd one out. So try to keep things simple. The first thing is try to get a gist. Don't try to solve always these questions like a parajumble. Should fourth should come first, or sentence number two will come first, or what could be the introductory and ending. What we have to essentially link the sentences. Now we know the theme of the first sentence, theme of the second sentence, theme of the third sentence. So sometimes it becomes quite comfortable to get these kind of question correctly. So I think in this question, third, so your answer in the box, the answer that you will insert is 3, right? That was the first question. I don't see much confusion in this question. Let's move to the next question. Question number 20. So now again, let's try to read and figure out what every sentence is talking about. Can we just summarize each and every sentence? Don't be in hurry. Read properly. Having an appreciation of the workings of another person's mind. So you need to have understanding of the working of another person's mind is a prerequisite for natural language acquisition, strategic social interaction, reflexive thought, and moral judgment. So I think if you want to do all these things, like you want to acquire a language, you want to have a very strategic social interaction, I want to reflect, keep, reflexive thoughts as well as morally judging people. You need to appreciate the working of another person's mind. It means you have to understand other person's mind. It is a theory of mind, though some scholars prefer to call it mentalizing or mind reading, which is important for the development of one's cognitive ability. Okay, so the first sentence basically talks about understanding of other person's mind. Second sentence talks about development of one's cognitive ability. Like mind reading is important for our own development of our own cognitive means thinking ability. Third, though we must speculate about its evolutionary origin. Now, what are we trying to speculate? We do have indication that the capacity evolved sometime in the last few million. Now, this sentence talks about some capacity that has been developed in last few million years, and we are trying to search for its origin, like from when it started. Now this sentence leaves us with a curiosity, like what kind of capacity are we talking about? And sentence number 4 also talks about this capacity develops from early beginnings in the first year of life to the adults fast and often effortless understanding of others thought, feelings, and intention. So there is some capacity that is developing from early beginning in a person's stage, and that capacity focuses on understanding of others thought, feeling, and intention. And sentence number 5, one of the most fascinating human capacity is the ability to perceive and interpret other people's behavior in terms of their mental state. Now we can analyze the theme. The sentence or the whole paragraph focuses on one capacity, and that capacity is related with understanding others. So I think 4 and 5 are related because it talks about one of the most fascinating human capacity is the ability, and this capacity developed from early beginnings. Now here we are trying to speculate about this, the origin, like when it started. So maybe 3, 4, 5, they have a common theme. So my answer could be among 1 and 2. Now let's read 1 and 2 again. I think sentence number 1 really talks about understanding of other person's mind. And the capacity also we're talking about people's behavior or what is going on in terms of their mental state, right? So obviously the theme of all the sentences, your capacity to understand what is going on in other mind, that is the theme of the whole paragraph. While sentence number 2 is focusing on developing cognitive abilities. Now, the whole paragraph is talking about one of the capacity. And this sentence is talking about there is a term called mind reading, theory of mind, which is important for development of one's cognitive ability. So indirectly we can link sentence number 2 with the rest of the sentence. But if I have to solve a question of odd one out, then sentence number 2 is not at all directly related with other sentences. So for me, I think sentence number 2 is going to be the correct answer. 3, 4, and 5 you should have eliminated. Confusion should be between 1 and 2. If you read them carefully, it again talks about prerequisite is understanding others' mind. And all this sentence all talking about the same capacity. So clearly, sentence number 2 is going to be an odd one out. So in odd one out question, it's very essential you summarize or you try to figure out the key idea that has been discussed in the paragraph and then try to see which all sentences are related with that key idea. Maybe that are not going to be your answer. And whatever sentences are left, then try to connect with the key idea. The sentence that can be connected better cannot be an answer. Something that is not connected or very, very distantly connected, that could be your answer. So I think these were two questions that appear as odd one out in CAT 23. Like in CAT 23, last year CAT, out of 8 questions of verbal ability, 2 questions in each slot were from odd one out and 2 questions were from Parajumble. So now there are 2 questions from Parajumble. Now in this Parajumble, we have to generate a proper sequence. So again, our objective is first is to read all the sentences. Second would be try to figure out a mandatory pair. Can we identify or can we link two sentences? And then possibly what could be the first sentence and the last sentence? That is the objective. But again, while solving the question, you need to be really very careful in terms of reading because sometimes what happens, we simply look for some keywords. I would suggest, in addition to looking for the keywords like pronoun or conjunction, you need to also read the sentences also thoroughly. Because if CAT designs a question, there has to be some logic. But then to capture that logic, it is very, very important for us to understand the sentences. Algorithms hosted on the internet are accessed by many. So biases in AI models have resulted in much larger impact, adversely affecting far larger groups of people. So I think it talks about there are some biases in AI model. And since these algorithms are hosted on the internet, so they are reaching to many people, and that's why there is some bias that would adverse a large group of people. Second sentence, though algorithm, so maybe first could be an introductory sentence, but I think it looks more about like AI models have a bigger reach, and that's why the biases are going to affect a larger set of people. Though algorithm bias is a popular term, the foundation of such bias is not an algorithm, but in the data. So you can say the origin of the bias does not lie in the algorithm. It doesn't lie in the program, rather it lies in the data. Algorithms are not biased. Data is, as algorithm merely reflect persistent pattern that are presenting in the training data. So if the algorithm become biases, that is not because algorithm itself is biased. Possibly the data that has been captured is biased. That is presenting bias pattern and that is creating some kind of bias. This looks to be more of an explanatory sentence. You cannot start with this sentence. Despite their widespread impact, it is relatively easier to fix AI biases than human generated biases. Now, this sentence talks about the solution, like it's easy to fix AI biases. Even though their impact is quite large, it's easy to fix the problem. Now, this sentence focuses on solution. as it is simpler to identify the former than try to make people unlearn behavior learned over generation. So human biases are difficult to fix. AI biases are easy to fix. The impact of biased decisions made by human is localized and geographically confined, but with the advent of AI, the impact of such decision is spread over a much wider scale. Okay, now second and third cannot be starting point, because third, you can talk about solution once you introduce the problem. And sentence number 1 and sentence number 4 and 2 are possibly focusing on problem. So third cannot be a starting sentence. And second also, it's more about it saying the reason for algorithm bias is not where the reason lies. Now this sentence talks about the reason for some problem, and this talks about the solution. Typical flow in a parajumble could be you start with the problem, then go to reason, and then try to talk about solution. So that way, either I should start from first or fourth. Now compare with first and fourth. I think fourth is a better introductory sentence. The reason it talks about the impact of biased decision made by human is local. With the advent, now this is where I'm taking introductory sentence. With the advent of AI. So it is introducing the beginning of AI. The impact of such biases is spread. And now that spread is being explained in sentence number 1. So 4.1 is linked, because what you're talking in 4 is being explained in 1, because you're saying these algorithms are hosted and accessed by many. So it has a large impact. So, and you're discussing that such decisions impact is on a much wider scale. So 4.1 is linked, and 2 talks about the reason, and 3 talks about fixing the problem. So despite their impact, it is relatively easy to fix. So now 4.1 is more about problem. Second is the reason, like the bias does not lie in algorithm, it lies in data, and it is quite easy to fix. Third will become a concluding sentence, should be the last sentence. So the best possible answer is 4.1.2.3. In case, guys, any confusion, you can put in chat box so I can try to resolve your queries. Is this clear to all of you? Okay, now let's move to the next question. Question number 22. That was the last question in slot 1 of Parajumble. Let's read this. What precisely are the unusual elements that make a particular case so attractive to a certain kind of audience? Now, here's a question mark. Observe these question marks very carefully, because if there is some answer that is coming, then maybe I would say that question would come first, and after that answer is going to come. And it also talks about what are those unusual element. If a sentence gives you an answer for those unusual element, could actually follow the sentence. It might be a particularly savage or unfathomable level of depravity. Very often it has something to do with a precise amount of mystery involved. Unsolved and perhaps unsolvable cases offer something that ordinary murder doesn't. And sentence number 4 talks about why are some crimes destined for perpetual re-examination and thus locked into permanent obscurity. Now, there are two sentences that are raising some questions. Sentence number 1 and sentence number 4 should come together, because these are asking some questions. Now, should my sequence be 1-4 or should it be 4-1? That is what I am interested. Look at which one is more general in nature. If you compare 1 and 4, obviously 4 becomes a starting sentence, says why are some crimes destined for perpetual weeks? There are certain crimes where we continuously examining, and there are certain crimes that are locked into permanent obscurity. People don't even bother about those crimes. They don't focus or concentrate on that. So some crime grab the attention of people. Some of them are in obscurity. Obscurity is something that people are not aware of. Now that's a very interesting point that has been introduced. So what differentiate why some crimes are popular, or some crimes are catching the attention of people, why not? And the follow-up question is coming in one. What precisely are the unusual elements? What are those elements that make a particular case so attractive to a certain kind of audience? So you're having a follow-up question. First is what makes A different from B, and then you're saying what is so unique about A. That's how you're trying to ask these questions. Now the sentence number, so I would say 4-1 is a link. Now some of you might confuse, can I start from 3? Now 3, if you start from 3, then there's no point of answering the question, because again you are trying to generate a curiosity why some crimes are, more popular. That's a question mark. If you start from third, that directly makes us unsolved and perhaps unsolvable cases offer something that ordinary murder doesn't. Now, this could be more of a concluding statement rather than beginning one. So, after 4-1, should I bring 3 or should I bring 2? If I can fit that, then obviously the last sentence I can write on my own. So, which sentence is related with first? It might be a particularly savage or unfathomable level of depravity. Now, these may be unusual elements. You talk about what are those unusual elements. Now, this could be particularly savage. Something savage means cruelty, something that has a lot of cruelty, or maybe unfathomable. Unfathomable is something that we don't understand, something that is beyond our understanding. Level of depravity. Now, depravity is means kind of immorality or some kind of uh, corrupt thoughts. So those look could be an unusual. So what I can do is I can relate sentence number 2 from 1 for the fact these two words talks about that unusual element that are present in certain cases. And very often it has something to do with a precise amount of mystery involved. Now the sentence numbers 2 is actually giving some link, because this is asking question unusual element, maybe savagery or maybe unfathomable level of depravity could be related with mystery that is involved, and that is what makes it very unusual and makes it more popular. And that is why you're coming to a conclusion that unsolved and perhaps unsolvable cases offer something that ordinary murder doesn't. Right, so that curiosity or that popularity element is coming because of the nature is unsolved or unsolvable. So third will become concluding sentence. The best option would be 4-1-2-3. The one thing that could have done is 4-1 is a definite link because two questions coming together. Second is linking with the first because of unusual element. And third could be a concluding statement in this question. That's how your answer will become 4-1, 2 and 3. So first what we did, we linked two sentences, 4 and 1 or 1-4. We judged 4-1 is a better link because 4 is more of an introductory or general sentence, and then follow-up question is coming in 1. Then 2 relates with the first. So obviously 4-1-2-3 could be the best possible answer. So this was CAT 23 slot 1. Let's move the questions of slot 2. Again, it's an odd one out question. So let's read the question very quickly. Self-care particularly links to loneliness, behavioral problem, and negative academic outcomes. So I think you're introducing or maybe talking about a term that is called as self-care, and self-care is linked with loneliness. Somebody is lonely, then he has to take care of himself or herself. It is also linked with some kind of behavioral problems, and academic outcomes could be negative, like you may not perform well in exam. So I think self-care linked with some negative consequences. Second, latchkey children refers to children who routinely return home from school to empty homes and take care of themselves for extended period of time. So latchkey children are the ones when they come back to their home from school, nobody is there in home. So empty homes. Maybe mom and dad or other family members are working, so there's no one in home, and you have to take care for a very extended period of time for yourself. So again, it has that element of self-care. and it defines the term latchkey children. Although self-care generally points to negative outcomes, it is important to consider that the bulk of research has yet to track long-term consequences. Now, this sentence talks about although self-care generally point to negative outcome, but research has yet to track long-term consequences. So it means you are saying that research has not tracked long-term consequences. Okay. In research and practice, the phrase children in self-care has come to replace latchkey in an effort to more accurately reflect the nature of their circumstances. So now I could link 4 and 2 because in 4 you are talking about that self-care word is replaced. Children in self-care are replaced with latchkey, and latchkey children refers to this. So maybe I could say 4 and 2 forms a mandatory pair, and possibly this could not be, both of them cannot be our answer. Although parents might believe that self-care would be beneficial for their development, recent research has found quite the opposite. So I think this talks about some parents might believe that self-care would be beneficial. Recent research has found quite the opposite. Now talks about the negative. Research pointing out that there are negative outcomes of self-care, even though some parents might believe otherwise. And 5 and 1 I can relate because it again talks about self-care is particularly linked to loneliness. It has negative academic outcome. So what you're talking about in 5, that research has found quite the opposite that is being linked. Now, I think third becomes quite contrary to the fifth, right? Because it talks about research has yet to track long-term consequences. While here you are talking recent research has found quite the opposite. So for me, I think 5 and 1 are related, 4 and 2 are related. Even though all the 5 sentences are talking about self-care, but most of the sentences have a negative tone, like this talks about negativity. This also talks about negativity because this defines extended period of time you have to take care of themselves. Right. These two terms are more of a definition, and these sentence number 5 and 1 are talking about, while sentence number third is raising a question mark on those negative outcome because you're saying, although it points to negative outcome, but research has not tracked anything. So it is raising a question over the negative consequences, while rest of the sentence have that negative undertone. So I think for me, 2 4 can be linked like 4 or 2 2 4. I'm not there to make a proper sequence between 4 and 2, and 5 and 1 are related with each other. What I found is an odd one out is sentence number 3. The reason for me is, so I think the reasoning that I'm trying to give, even though someone may say that this also talks about self-care pointing to negative outcome, but that is not the main idea of this sentence. The main idea lies over here. It is important to consider that the bulk of research is yet to track. It means you're trying to say that it is too premature to say that self-care is negative, while other sentences are actually focusing on it as negative. And 4 and 1 are basically research has defined a very particular term rather than using the self-care. The word is latchkey. That is more accurately reflecting that negative outcome. So for me, third will become an odd one. So we'll proceed to the next question. Now, let's read this one. So, first one is without having any prejudices, try to read all the sentences carefully. Bring some thought. If you're not able to bring any thought process, leave the question. Best advice. But since odd one out are more like without any options, so if you have invested 1.5 minute, 2 minutes, it makes sense. You can make an intelligent guess. Don't invest too much of time. In case you're not able to figure out even 2 or 3 sentences, you're not able to link, it's better to leave the question. That's my advice. The banning of northern lights could be considered a precursor to censoring books for moral, worldview, or religious reason. So I think it talks about the book called Northern Light has been banned as a precursor, and you can censor more books for moral or religious reasons. Attempt to ban books or attempt to silence authors who have summoned immense courage in telling their stories. Now, this sentence talks about if you are banning a book, it means indirectly you are trying to silence those authors who have put in a lot of courage in telling their stories. Now, the banning and challenging of books in the US escalated to an unprecedented level. So it highlights a situation where in US now a lot of books are being banned or challenged. Now this has raised to an unprecedented level. The widely acclaimed fantasy novel Northern Lights was banned in some part of the US and was the second most challenged book in the US. Again, it focuses on that this book, Northern Light, is very much acclaimed. Acclaimed means appreciated, widely appreciated book, is banned in some part of the US and it is second most challenged book in the US. The American Library Association documented an unparalleled number of reported book challenge to 2022, about 2,500 unique titles. Okay, so now 3 and 5 is linked. The reason is it talks about the banning and challenging of book in the US has escalated to an unprecedented level. It talks about that the instances of banning the book and challenges of the book has increased to a level which is never thought of. Unprecedented is something that's never happened before. And sentence number 5 gives more of that example. Like they have documented an unparalleled numbers of reported book, and that number is almost about 2,500. So what you are talking in the idea that is being discussed in third is exemplified by sentence number 5. So 3, 5 is linked together. Now in that context, now you take further example of a book called Northern Light. Right. So 4 and 1 talks about the banning of a book called Northern Light and their implication. While sentence number 2 is again talking about banning the book, but the idea is more of silencing the author who have summoned courage. Now here the focus is on authors. The rest of the sentence are focusing on banning of the books or challenges of the books, not the author. So even though second is related in some way to rest of the four sentence, but you can clearly say this perspective is entirely different. Now you're highlighting on authors, like you're silencing the authors who have summoned a lot of courage in telling their stories, while other sentences you're talking about banning the book and challenge the book. So maybe this could distinctly be related. Maybe later part when we discuss a little more about authors, this sentence could come. But as of now, I think two is something that is an odd one out because the focus. So read carefully. If you read this much, you might say, okay, this is also talks about attempting to ban book. But the point is, this is the point that has been discussed. It is attempt to silence authors. While rest of the sentence, there is no mention of author. It doesn't, you know, talk anything that is questioning or it is talking about the courage of the author. There's no reference in any other one. 1 and 4 we can relate. We can say this book was banned in some part and was the most second most challenged book. And this banning could lead to precursor. Precursor means uh, an event has happened and now more such event would likely to happen. So now this becomes a reason for censoring other books for moral or religious reasons. So that's why 4 and 1 are linked and 5 and 3 are linked. Maybe 3 will come first, then 5 would come, then 4 and 1. This is how you can link. But I'm not here to solve a parajumble question. So my focus is on finding out the sentence that is not related with other sentences. So clearly the option is sentence number 2. Okay, now these are two parajumble questions. First parajumble that is asked in CAT 23 slot number 2. Look at this one. Like the ants that make up a colony, no single neuron holds complex information like self-awareness, hope, or pride. Although the human brain is not yet understood enough to identify the mechanism by which emotions function, most neurobiologists agree that complex interconnection among the parts give rise to qualities that belong only to the whole. Now it talks about although the human brain is not understood fully, but a lot of neurobiologists agree to the fact that complex interconnection among these parts give rise to the qualities. Now, nonetheless, the sum of all the neurons in the nervous system generate complex human emotions like fear and joy, none of which can be attributed to a single neuron. So now this sentence talks about no single neuron hold complex information. And this sentence talks about nonetheless the sum of all neurons in the nervous system. So you sum add up all those neurons, it generate complex human emotions. But this cannot be attributed to a single neuron. Maybe 1 and 3 indirectly could be related. Fourth, human consciousness is often called an emergent property of the human brain. Best introduction comes from four. Human consciousness is often called an emergent property of the human brain. So our consciousness, our awareness about ourselves is emergent property. It's a property of human brain. Then after four, I can't go with third because here we don't have any discussion of neurons. And second, directly you're talking about in fourth, human conscious often called, and suddenly you go to second, it doesn't make sense. So I think the best option that I can come with first, like the ant that make up a colony. So your emergent property, brain ka. So brain mein kya neurons are there. So like the ant that make up a colony, no single neurons hold complex information. Nonetheless, sum of all the neurons in the nervous system generate complex. 1 and 3 could be linked together, and maybe after 4, 1 can come. And maybe 2, I can use conclusion. Even though human brain is not yet fully understood, but still this neurobiologists, since neurobiologists are the one who are focusing on study of neurons, agree that complex interconnection. Now this talks about those complex interconnection, that is sum of all those neurons, right, generate complex human emotion. And this complex interconnection among the part give rise to the qualities that belong only to the whole. So second could be the last sentence. So the best option is 4. Is apart from 4, we cannot see from where we can start this parajumble. The fourth is a clear cut introductory sentence, the first sentence. After that, we can link with 1. 1 and 3, we could link in the beginning itself because it talks about no single neuron hold complex information. Here it talks about nonetheless, sum of all the neurons generate complex human emotion. 2 is a closing sentence. So my parajumble is 4, 1, 3, 2. Go to next one. This was the last parajumble of CAT 23 slot 2. Contemporary African writing like the bottle leopard voices this theme. Now here we got the paragraph. Now pronoun. This theme using two children and two background and to juxtapose two varying culture. Juxtapose means compare. So contemporary African writing like so it's more of an example. You're talking about an example of the bottle leopard voices this theme. So before this, you should try to talk about a sentence that gives some theme. Chuck aka explore the conflict, and cast the Western tradition as condescending, enveloping, and unaccommodating toward local African practice. So obviously, this gentleman is exploring some kind of conflict, and it's casting that Western tradition are condescending. It means Western tradition show themselves as superior, enveloping and unaccommodating. They are quite condescending towards local African practices. When we use the word condescending, it means you're treating someone as very, very inferior or trying to treat him as a very lowly and unaccommodating towards. So it highlights the negative aspect. But this cannot be a beginning sentence. You talk with the conflict. There is some kind of conflict. However, their views. So we have a link with now, this is the name of only one person. So I can't use the word their views. However, their views contradict the reality. So maybe there are some people who are expressing some views, and author is saying, however, their views contradict the reality. For a rich and sustaining local African cultural ethos exists for all who care to see and experience. Western Christian concepts tend to deny or feign is pretend, ignorance about the existence of a genuine and enduring indigenous African tradition. So I think I could figure out 1, 2, and 3 cannot be a possible starter. So that makes us that I should start from sentence number 4. And after 4, since it talks about Western Christian concepts tend to deny or feign ignorance, but their views contradict the reality. Their views किसके लिए आएगा? The their views word can use for these concepts, because their view cannot come after first, because in first you're talking about contemporary African writing, while here you're talking about Western Christian concepts, right? So clearly 4, 3 are linked together. However, word also highlighting that contradiction. However, their views contradict the reality. It means Western Christian concept saying that they deny or pretend ignorance about that for them there is no genuine and enduring indigenous African tradition. They say there's not that. But author says this is in contradiction of reality. Why? Because for a rich and sustaining local African cultural ethos exists for all who care to see and experience. If you're willing to see and experience, yes, genuine local African culture ethos exists. Ethos is value system or your own culture exists. So I think 4 and 3 are linked. And then after 4 and 3, what I can use? Should I go with 2, 1 or should I go with 1, 2? Now that is where I have to figure out. Contemporary African writing like the Bottle Leopard voices this theme. Now see this theme. So I think the theme is that African cultural ethos exist if you really want to see. And if you look at contemporary writing like the Bottle Leopard, voices this theme using two children and two background to juxtapose two varying cultures, right? And then you're saying Chukwukema is the guy, explore the conflict and cast the as. Now, this is the final remark. You're saying that Western tradition are quite condescending, right? They are unaccommodating, and that is why they are trying to pretend that there is no genuine and enduring indigenous African tradition that exists. So maybe 2 will become a kind of concluding sentence. Because after 3, if you take 2, then first doesn't make sense. Because here you are being quite negative, while here you're talking about contemporary African writing. Now, contemporary African writing will not reflect this negativity that has been discussed. This negativity is toward Western tradition. Now, this is contemporary African writing. So I don't think sentence 1 can come after 2. Right. So that's why we have to go with 4, 3, 1 is the correct answer in this one. So this was for CAT 23 slot 2. We'll move to CAT 23 slot 3. Let's look at the question. If you have any doubt, please just keep writing in the chat box. Although hard skills have traditionally ruled the roost, some companies are moving away from choosing prospective hire based on technical abilities alone. So I think hard skills are still ruling the roost. It means if you're recruiting a person, suppose you are recruiting an engineer, then obviously his coding skills are important, his hard skills are important. But the companies are moving away from choosing only on technical skill. Now you're adding something more to it. You are choosing people not only on the hardcore skill, but maybe looking for other dimensions also. Companies are shaking up the old definition of ideal candidate and ditching the idea of looking for the singularly perfect candidate altogether. That talks about your shaking of or you're relinquishing old definition of an ideal candidate. Here you're talking about now companies are recruiting candidate not only based on technical skills, maybe you're looking for other skills. It talks about their old definition of ideal candidate they are shaking off and ditching the idea of looking for a singularly perfect candidate. Now, some job descriptions are frequently asking for candidate demonstrate soft skills such as leadership or team. Okay, so clearly you're saying now, apart from hardcore technical skill, you're looking for some soft skills like leadership or teamwork. That's not to say that practical know-how is no longer required. Some jobs still call for highly specific expertise. But if you're looking for leadership skill, doesn't mean that you're not looking for technical skills. The move toward prioritizing soft skills is a natural response to 3 years of the pandemic, says a senior recruiter at Central. So I think for me, after reading all the 5 sentences, I could clearly say all sentences like sentence number 1, 3, 4, and 5 are talking about the combination of hard and soft skills that you are looking in terms of recruiting candidates. Sentence number 2 is talking about something, an idea of what an ideal candidate means. Or so I don't think all these sentences talking about choosing an ideal or perfect candidate. They are talking about what kind of skills earlier we were looking for. Now we're looking for a combination of soft and hard skills. And that is why I think second is an odd one out. Because it talks about an ideal and perfect candidate. Rest of the sentence talking about what should be the right criteria to choose the people. Traditionally, it was looking for more of hard skill. Now you have added softer skills. Rather, it's a very natural response because of pandemic. You want prioritizing soft skills. So clearly, second is an odd one out. Question number 20. So first thing is read and try to summarize, and then maybe if you can connect it rightly, you will get the right answer. Boa Senior, who lived through the 2004 tsunami, the Japanese occupation and disease brought by British settlers, was the last native of the island chain who was fluent in Bo. So this guy, Boa Senior, was the last native of the island chain who was fluent in Bo. Now, maybe Bo could be a language because you're talking about fluency. The indigenous population has been steadily collapsing since the island chain was colonized by British settlers in 1850 and used for most of the following 100 years as a colonial penal colony. Now it talks about the indigenous population in this island have been collapsing and it has been used as a penal colony. Means all those people are getting punishment in Britain are being sent to these colony. Original people are actually steadily decreasing. Now it talks about decrease in population of maybe aborigines or indigenous population, and this island is being used as a penal colony. While here you're talking about Boa Senior, who was the last native island of this chain who was fluent in Bo. Taking its name from a new extinct tribe, Bo is one of the 10 great Andamanese languages which are thought to date back to pre-Neolithic human settlement of Southeast Asia. Now again, you're talking about Bo is one of the languages that dates back to pre-Neolithic human settlement of when these people came to Southeast. From that time, Bo was one of the language. Now, so maybe 1, 2, and 3, 2 looks a little odd till now because first and third talking about the language that is Bo. The last speaker of an ancient tribal language has died in the Andaman Island, breaking a 65,000-year link to one of the world's oldest culture. Again, you're talking about that language. Somebody, the last speaker of that ancient language has died. Though the language has been closely studied by researchers with linguistic history, Boa Senior spent the last few years of her life unable to converse with anyone in her mother tongue. Clearly, we can take 2 as our answer because it talks about collapse of indigenous population in the island, while rest of the sentence talk about the language and the person who was speaking those language. So clearly, second could be the odd one out in this. I don't think there's much to analyze in this question. And the last question for this slot of for this slot 3, odd one out. Oh, sorry, this is Parajumble. Look at the Parajumble. So both the questions of odd one out in slot 3 were comparatively easier, right? There was a distinct sentence that were quite, different from rest of the sentences. So you have to focus, read on the keywords. Don't just read few words. Just try to read the complete sentence and then try to judge and go with your gut feeling. Centuries later, formal learning is still mostly based on reading, even with the widespread use of other possible education affecting technologies such as film, radio, and television. Now it talks about centuries later. Formal learning is still based on reading. So maybe today also we learn a lot based on reading. Even though widespread use of other technologies like we can learn through films, radio, and television, still reading is very, very popular. One of the immediate and recognizable impact of the printing press was on how people learn. In the scribble culture, it primarily involved listening, so memorization was paramount. So you're talking about one of the immediate and recognizable impact to the printing was how people learn. In the scribble culture, it was more of listening. The transformation of learner from listener to reader was a complex social and cultural phenomenon, and it was not until the industrial era that the concept of universal literacy took root. The printing press shifted the learning process as listening and memorization gradually gave way to reading, and learning no longer required the presence of a mentor. It could be done privately. I think second and fourth are talking about the impact of the printing press. One of the immediate impact was how people learn. Earlier, people used to listen and memorize, but the printing press shifted this learning process from listening to reading, and you could now learn in private. You can learn alone. You never needed a mentor. Not always you needed a mentor. So I think 2-4 could be a link. Now it talks about today itself, centuries later. After that printing press, centuries later, today also people most. So I think this could be a concluding or maybe last sentence, but I'm sure it cannot be the first sentence. 2-4, it should come after 2-4, maybe immediately or at the last. Let's read the third. Transformation of learner from listener to reader. I think this talks about transformation. So maybe this is the best. This can come after 3. Why? Because 2 and 4 are talking about the printing press has transformed learning process. It shifted from listening to reading. And this transformation was a complex social and cultural phenomena. And it was not until the industrial era that the concept, universal literacy concept, came into the picture, not till industrial era. And now, centuries later, formal learning is still mostly based on reading. Now, that is where you can finally conclude. So you can say 2-4-3-1 is the best possible answer in this one. Last question for CAT 23, slot 3. Now, here we can clearly identify like her vision, she. These two sentences must come after the name Veena Sajwala. But can I start from the first sentence? Let's read. Veena Sajwala, a material scientist at the University of New South Wales, believes there is a new way of solving this problem. So now I think we have got a very, very clear link. We can start from 3. But let's read. If 3 talks about a problem, then we have clearly 3-1. And then maybe we'll put after that 2-4 or 4-2. E-waste contain huge quantities of valuable metals, ceramics, and plastic that could be salvaged and recycled, although currently not enough of it is. Yes, this talks about a problem. Like talks about e-waste is a lot of valuable material which can be recycled, and today it is not enough of it is being recycled. So you're saying Veena Sajwala, material scientist, University of New South, believes there's a new way of solving this problem. So clearly 3-1 is a link. And now we have to either think about these two options 3-1, 2-4 or 3-1, 4-2. So that's how you should think. Now let's read. How vision is for automated drones and robots to pick out components, put them into small furnace, melt them at specific temperature to extract the metals one by one before they are sent up to manufacturers for use. She planned to build microfactories that can tease apart the tangles of material in mobile phone, computer, and the device. I think fourth and two. Why? Because 2 explains the whole process, wherein 4 the idea is that she will set up micro factories that can tease apart the tangle of materials in mobile phone. And then what is the version is for automated drone and robot to pick out component, put them to small furnace and smelt them. So these are the micro factories that you're trying to explain. The concept of micro factories is being explained in 2. So best option should be 3-1-4-2. So I think these were 12 questions altogether that was in CAT 23. Now we'll move to CAT 22. Till now, have you any questions? If you have any question, please let me know. Now I can take your questions. Aran, which question are you talking about? 4, 2 cannot come. After 4, 2 cannot come. If you could, I'm sorry, I did not see your question at that point of time. Okay, now in CAT 22, started with Parajumble. I think in CAT 22, there were no questions of odd one out, only Parajumble. And instead of, odd one out, they introduced that fill in the blank question. So in CAT 22, we have to solve all the questions of Parajumble. So let's start with that. So the idea is to read all the sentences. Sometime you will get clue, as in the last sentence, we got those pronouns and this problem, she or her vision. So that was relatively easy question to solve. In some of the questions, we may get clues. In some of the questions, we have to understand the ideas, and based on those ideas, you have to link the sentences. Okay, Gaurav, in official mock that CAT has released, there were 22 questions in DILR. So some of us are speculating that this time there could be 22 questions, or it may not be. They have never mentioned that official mock, whatever the pattern is, they are given in official mock will be replicated in actual CAT. That's never they have mentioned. But there are speculations, so that's why we have also given you two further sectional tests of 22 questions in DILR. But so we go with both the mindset. You get 20 questions, fine. If you get 22 questions, still it's fine. Just try to give those two marks. But there's nowhere written that official whatever is there in official papers, similar pattern will follow in actual case. That's a more of representative. See, generally official mock was given to get familiarized with the way window would look like, how the screen would look like, how you have to navigate all the questions. That was more of the purpose. The purpose was not to tell you exactly how many questions are going to come. But still, since there was a change, so IMS has done, like we have added two more sectional tests in the DILR section based on this new pattern. But there's no guarantee, or there's nowhere it is clear that 22 questions would come or 20. So prepared, mentally prepared for all those situations. Okay, let's look at question number 18. Some company leaders are basing their decisions on locating offices to foster innovation and growth, as the best performing inventors suffer the greatest productivity losses when the commuting grew longer. Commute means you're going from office to home, home to office. So some companies are now taking the decision, or they're locating their office by considering the fact that people should commute as less as possible, because productivity losses are there when commutes grew long. Second is shorter commutes support innovation by giving employees more time in the office and greater opportunities for in-person collaboration while removing the physical strain of long commute. So it clearly talks about if your office is very nearby to home, so sentence talks about it will result into more innovation. Third says this is not always the case. Remote work does not automatically lead to greater creativity and productivity. It is giving a contrasting point. As office water cooler conversations are also very important. Office water cooler conversation means near to water cooler or near to places where we go for a break. Those conversations also play a very vital role. Some see the link between long commutes and productivity as support for work from home scenario, as many workers have grown accustomed to their commute free arrangement during the pandemic. So some people perceive that long commute and productivity relationship is because now people are accustomed to short travel during the pandemic or no travel. Third, we cannot start first or second, because fourth is again further it is linking commuting with productivity. Some people seeing that link is between commute and productivity. So maybe choose between two and one. 2 looks to be a better introductory sentence. Shorter commutes support innovation by giving employees more time in the office and greater opportunities for in-person collaboration while removing the physical strain of the long commute. I think this could be starting sentence. And 1 and 4 are linked. Some companies are leader basing their decision on this. They feel that innovation is can happen more if the offices are closer by. And some see the link between long commute support for. So I think two perspectives are being offered. 1 and 4 are talking about the perspective toward the distance and productivity. Third is contradicting the point that short commute always result in is not direct contradicting. This is not always the case. It means author is not clearly saying that this is wrong, but it is not always. If I say you will all not always get the parajumble correct, it doesn't mean that every time you'll do the parajumble you'll get wrong. It's like some of the cases or some of the questions you might find difficult. So third is a kind of tangential contradiction. So maybe this should come in the last because after this I can't bring any other sentence. So maybe the my parajumble or option could be you start from 2, 1 and 3, sorry, 1 and 4 are linked because some company leader are basing the decision on locating officers to foster as they see that their best performing inverters suffer the greatest productivity losses when their commute grew longer. And while some see the link between long commute as support to work from home scenarios, as many workers have grown. So these are two perspective about, and since one is explaining more two, so I would say 2, 1, and 4. And third is something talk. This is not all the case. Water cooler product conversation also important for supporting innovation. Because after 3, I can't bring 4. So the link could be 2, 1, 4, 3 could be the best possible answer in this question. But now in this question, only clue is this is not always the case, but not so visibly this is connected. So 2, you start, you introduce the context, shorter commute, support innovation. Then some company leader are basing the decision based on this idea. Some see the link as support for work from home scenario. But remote work, then author finally comment remote work or does not automatically lead to greater creativity as office water cooler are also very important. So that's why this becomes a concluding remark. So the best possible answer is 2, 1, 4, 3. Tricky question. Come to the next one. Fish skin collagen has excellent thermostability and tensile strength, making it ideal for use as bandage that adheres to the skin and adjusts to body movement. So the question talks about there is fish skin collagen, which has got some excellent qualities. It has got good thermostability. It means it can stabilize temperature as well as tensile strength, which means cannot be easily broken. And so ideal use for bandage that adheres to skin and adjusts to body movement. Okay. Collagen, one of the main structural protein in connective tissues in the human body, is well known for promoting skill region. Now, first I'll try to focus on collagen, then I'll become more specific. Fish skin collagen. So maybe first should come somewhere after 2, not immediately, or it may come that we have decide after reading third and fourth. But in second and 1, second is more general kind of introductory nature. It's one of the main structural proteins and connective tissues in the human body is well known for promoting skin generation. Fish skin swims in here as diseases and bacteria that affect fish are different from most human pathogens. It again talks about those fish skin swims in here as diseases and bacteria that affect fish are different. Like kind of disease and bacteria that are affecting fishes are very, very different that affects human pathogens. The risk of introducing disease agents into other species through the use of pig and cow collagen proteins for wound healing has inhibited its broader application in the field. Okay, so I think start with collagen. That collagen is one of the main structural protein that regenerate the skin. And then maybe I could say 1 and 3 could be linked together because it talks about fish skin. I could bring 4 after 2. It gives you, if you're using cow and pig's collagen proteins for healing the wound, it can affect certain bacteria. But then you bring an alternative fish skin that has very, very different bacteria. So you bring that solution to the problem. And in the last, you go with one that you talks about that it has got excellent thermostability and now it's an ideal for bandage. So you're talking about two collagen is a material or is a protein that used in skin regeneration. But if you use pig and cow collagen, it can have certain risks. So instead of that, you should use fish skin and it has got excellent stability and it becomes an ideal uses for bandage. So I think the correct answer should be 2431. If you have any doubt in this question, please let me know. So 1 3 or 3 1 should come together because it talks about fish skin. Second is more generic, so it should start the parajumble. Now the problem is to fit four. If I bring 1 and 3 or 3 1 after 2, then 4 cannot be the last sentence because once you talk about the ideal candidate, ideal users, then you don't talk about the risk, right? Something that becomes, or anything, if you're talking about an ideal situation, then you can't talk about the risk. First, talk about the risk and then talk about how you can handle that risk. So maybe fourth, introduce a risk, then it gives another alternative that doesn't pose that much of risk, making it an ideal candidate for that users. So that's why I'm using 2, 4, 3, and 1. Okay. This was last question for slot number 120, CAT 22. So I think fourth should follow. It cannot be the starting sentence because by looking, I could see it is for this reason that today's trade issues are increasingly involving intellectual property, as Western countries have an interest in protecting the revenues along with freeing trade in non-tangible. So it is for this reason. So I need to search for a sentence that gives me some reason. The creative element in product. So I'll read the first sentence. The creative element in product design has become of paramount importance as it is one of the few ways a firm or industry can sustain a competitive advantage over its rival. So I think creative element in product design has become supremely important because this is one of the ways in which you can get competitive advantage over your competitors. Then it says, in fact, the creative element to the value of word industry would be larger still if we added the contribution of the creative element to other industries such as the design of tech accessory. So any innovation happens, then it does not only benefit to that company, it benefits to all those companies that are making their accessories or related products also. The creative industry is receiving a lot of attention today as its growth rate is faster than that of the world economy as a whole. So I think starting sentence could be third. You talk about the creative industry getting a lot of attention and its growth rate is faster than that of the world economy. Creative industry is growing at a rapid pace. And then 1 and 4 I could link because the reason that why uh, trade issues are increasingly involving intellectual property is because of this reason. Because it helps you to gain competitive advantage. So 1 4 a link. So maybe should I think for 3214 or should I think for 3142 is something that I have to judge. Maybe it talks about the creative element, the value of word industry would be larger. Value of word industry, creative element and the value of word industry is larger. It focuses on the creative industry becoming very, very important. Growth rate is fast. And maybe after 3, you should bring 2. In fact, its value is larger if we add the contribution of creative element in other industry. So I think 3 to 3 is introducing, 2 is explaining that. And then 1, it talks about it helps you to gain competitive advantage, and that is the reason for having these trade issues. So the correct answer will become 3214. So this was CAT 2022 slot 1. Quickly move to the next parajumble of slot 2 and slot 3, and that's what we are going to do. The trajectory of cheerfulness through the self. Now, trajectory is a path of cheerfulness through the self is linked to the history of the word cheer, which comes from an old French meaning face. So it talks about the path or the trajectory of the word cheerfulness through the self. How you get that cheerfulness through the self is connected to the history of the word cheer. And this word cheer is coming from old French meaning face. Translations of the Bible into vernacular languages expanded the noun cheer into the more abstract cheerfulness, something that circulates as an emotional and social quality defining self and a moral community. So when you translated Bible into local languages, there's expanded the word cheer into more abstract, means something that is a little less understood, cheerfulness, something that is circulated as an emotional and social quality. When you take on a cheerful expression, no matter what the state of your soul, your cheerfulness moves into the self. Now it talks about cheerfulness moving into the self. The interior of the self is changed by the power of cheer. People in the medieval Canterbury tales of piteous or a sober cheer. Cheer is an expression and body part lying at the intersection of emotions and physio. A little tricky question, I would say, but I have to start. Maybe I'm going to start from second. Maybe 1 and 3 are linked. Why? Because it talks about cheerfulness moves into the self. And this sentence also talks about the trajectory of through the self is linked to the history. So it also talks about cheerfulness moving into the self. And it also talks about the trajectory. And the starting sentence could be when you take on a cheerful expression. Maybe 3 and 1 is a link. I, I can't say whether 3 will definitely start, but 3 1 is a link. Now you talk about translation of the Bible into vernacular language expanded the noun cheer into the more abstract cheerfulness. Now it talks about the word cheer into expanding into cheerfulness. People in the medieval Canterbury tales of a piteous or a sober cheer an expression in body. See, you're focusing on the word cheer. So what could be your best starting sentence? 1 4 I can link because cheerfulness through the self is linked to the history, and that history is given in medieval Canterbury Tales. So, what historical history of the word cheer you're talking about, and that history is being elaborated in sentence number 4. So, 1 4 is a link. 2 definitely cannot be starting sentence. So, maybe I will go with and 3 1 is linked. So, maybe 3 1 4 will come together. And then maybe I can talk about 2 at the last. So, for me, the answer could be 3 1 4 2. So after that word cheers history, you are moving to further in terms of translation. This word cheer, here you're talking about cheer in expression, and the translation has expanded this noun cheer into more abstract and delightful cheerfulness. So maybe after 4 2 also makes sense. So 1 4 2 is also a link, and 3 and 1 is also a link. So I think the best option has to be 3 1 4 2. Okay. This Let's look at the another question of CAT 2022 slot 2. Women may prioritize cooking because they feel they alone are responsible for mediating a toxic and unhealthy food system. Okay, food is commonly framed through the lens of individual choice. You can choose to eat healthily. This could be a starting sentence. This is particularly so in a neoliberal context where the state has transferred the responsibility for food onto individual consumers. I can't start from third, but this is particularly so. So I had to read the fourth. Maybe till now I could see second could be the first sentence. It talks about food is framing of food through the lens of individual choices. The individualized framing of choices appeals to a popular desire to experience agency but draws away from the structural obstacle that stratify. I think I can link 2 and 4. Why? Because 2 talks about framing of food through the lens of individual choice, and this also talks about the individual framing of choices. 2 looks to be the starting sentence. So I think individualized framing of choice appeals to a popular. Now, this concept appeals to a popular desire to experience agency, but draws away from the structural obstacle that stratify individual food choice. And this is particularly so in a neoliberal context where state has transferred. And this becomes even more important or particularly relevant when state has transferred food. So I think 2, 4, 3, and 1 comes women may prioritize now cooking. So now they may prioritize cooking. They may give more importance to cooking because they feel they alone are responsible for mediating a toxic and unhealthy food system. So 2, 4 is quite well connected. After that, bringing 1 and then bringing 3 doesn't make sense, right? Just because state has transferred responsibility of food onto individual consumer cannot follow 1. Rather, this can follow if individual consumers have the responsibility, and because of this, women may prioritize cooking. So that's why I could say 2, 4, 3, 1 is the best possible answer in this question. Next question of Parajumble. From chemical pollutants in the environment to the damming of rivers to invasive species transferred through global trade and travel, every environmental issue is different and there is no single tech solution. So, we're talking about multiple environmental issue and you're saying that it is different and there's no single tech solution that can solve this crisis. This discourse is dialogue or discussion on the threat of environmental collapse revolves around cutting down emission, but the biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse are caused by myriad and diverse. Now it also talks about biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse are caused by multiple reasons. This would require legislation that recognizes the rights of future generation and other species that allows the judiciary to uphold a much higher standard of environmental protection. Now, this talks about you need to have new law. This requires some law that recognizes rights of future generation. Clearly, our environmental crisis requires large political solutions, not minor technology. Now, you talk about no single tech solution can solve this crisis. And you're saying your environmental crisis, the way our environmental crises are there, they require large political solution, not a single tech one. So instead of focusing on infinite growth, we could consider path of stable state economies which preserving while preserving markets and healthy competition. So you're talking about large political solution. And when you talk about large political solution, it would definitely require a change in law. So maybe I think 1 becomes an example of 2. 2 could be the introductory sentence. Discourse on the threat of environment collapse revolve around cutting, though this dialogue of threat environmental collapse is only focusing on cutting down emission. But author clearly say, but biodiversity laws and ecosystem are caused by different and diverse reasons. Those reasons from chemical to in the environment to the damming of rivers to invasive species, all these example, and there is no single tech solution that can solve this crisis. So instead of focusing on minor technological ones, we should focus on large political solution. And if you want to focus on large political solution, this would require some kind of legislation. This would require some kind of law. So I think 2, 1, 4, 3 is the best possible answer. So 1 is more of elaborating on what you start with second. Second is the threat of environment is not restricted to only cutting down emission. It has multiple reasons and it has a lot of diversity. And that diversity is exemplified in sentence number 1. And it also says that only tech solution, no single tech solution can solve this crisis. So what we need is a large political solution. And to get those large political solution, you need some new legislation. So that's why I'm saying 2, 1, 4, 3. That was CAT 2022 slot 2. Now we'll finish last 3-4 questions or 3 to 4 questions of 22 slot 3. And then we'll try to recap what we learned. If I wanted to sit indoors and read or play Sonic the Hedgehog on a red hot Sega Mega Drive, I would often be made to feel guilty about not going outside to enjoy it while it lasts. So if I want to sit indoor, maybe somebody will make me feel guilty that why are you going outside? My mom quite reasonably wanted me and my sister out of the house in the sun. Tales of my mom's idyllic sounding childhood in the Sussex countryside, where trees were climbed by 8 a.m. and streams navigated by lunchtime, were passed down to us like folklore. Now, me and my sister and us, maybe noun pronoun link. To an introverted kid, that felt like a threat. Now, what felt like a threat? Just because a mom wanted you to go, that could not be a threat. Stories could not be threat. What could be a threat when you are making feel guilty? So maybe 1 and 4 are linked, and the feeling stayed with me. Even today, that feeling is there in me. And this us should come for me and my sister. So maybe 2-3 is one link, 1-4 is one link. And shall I start from 1 or should I start with 2? That is the question. So I think first, the author says my mom wanted to go me outside, and then maybe if I wanted to stay inside, I was made to feel guilty. So possibly 2-3 is a better starter. Then you will go with 1 and 4. Yes, Gav, you're right. 2-3-1-4 is absolutely right. Next question. Various industrial sector, including retail, transit system, enterprises, educational institution, event organizing, finance, travel, have now started leveraging these beacons. So this cannot be a first sentence. You would want to take the advantage of beacon solution to track and communicate with the customer. So a lot of industries are using these beacons. Now we have to focus what these beacons are. A beacon fixed onto a shop wall enables the retailers to assess the proximity of the customer and come up with a much targeted or personalized communication like offers, discount, and combos on product needs. How does beacon works? Like a beacon fix would enable the retailer to assess the proximity, how close the customer is, and can come up with some personalized communication. Smartphones and other mobile devices can capture the beacon signal, and distance can be estimated by measuring received signal strength. Beacons are tiny and inexpensive micro-location based technology devices that can send radio frequency signals and notify nearby Bluetooth devices of their presence and transmit. I think first we'll introduce what beacons are and how they work. So maybe 4 and 3. 4 introduces beacons are tiny and inexpensive micro-location based technology devices that can send radio frequency signal, notify nearby Bluetooth devices of their presence. And smartphone or other mobile can capture those signals. It talks about some signal, it captures distance can be estimated by measuring received signal strength. So I think 4-3 is linked. Now you're talking about because of this, various industrial sector, including retail, are using this and they can customize their messages. So I think 4-3-1-2 could be the best possible answer to this question. You start with beacons, that these are very inexpensive and small devices that can send some radio frequency signal through Bluetooth, and smartphones can capture that and you can measure the distance. And based on that, so that's why a lot of industry are using this and they can give some customized message based on the distances. So I think 4-3-1-2 is the correct answer. And this is the last question of CAT 22 slot 3. The more we are able to accept that our achievements are largely out of our control, the easier it becomes to understand that our failures and those of others are too. So the more we accept that our achievements are not just because of me. That's the ego. Like a lot of people say, this I have done. if you start believing that your achievement are largely out of your control, there were other factors that are responsible, it will become easier to understand that our failures are also not only because of us. But the raft of recent books about the limits of merit is an important correction to the arrogance of contemporary entitlement and opportunity to reassert the importance of luck or grace in our thinking. There have been a lot of books that are limiting the over importance of merit. Because if you feel everything is because of merit, that makes people arrogant. Now, these books were much needed correction to that arrogance. And it also reasserted that luck or grace or politeness also plays vital role. Meritocracy as an organizing principle is an inevitable function of free society as we are designed to see our achievement as worthy of regard. And in that, in turn, should increase our humility and the respect with which we treat our fellow citizen, helping ultimately to build a more So I think clearly you start with third. Why? Because it says if your meritocracy is an organizing principle, is an inevitable function of free society, where we see our achievement worthy of reward. But but is a contradiction. Now it is trying to give a little less importance to merit. So a lot of new books, a barrage of recent books about the limits of merit is an important correction to the arrogance of contemporary entitlement. And now you're saying the more we are able to accept that our achievements are largely out of control, it becomes easier to understand our failures, and that makes more compassionate society. Now, it will increase our humility and will respect others, will treat our fellow citizens, helping ultimately to build a more compassionate. That would be the result. So you're saying that only believing that merit is the most important thing can make you arrogant. So there are books, new books that has come up that limiting that decide that there is limit to merit. Merit alone cannot fetch you everything. That's the limit. And it's an important correction to the arrogance of this society. And this will make you more humble as well as respectful to others. So I think 3214 should be the best possible answer. So guys, we have discussed the questions of CAT 23 as well as CAT 22. Now let's recap what we did. Very quick recap. When we were doing question of odd one out, our objective is first to summarize every sentence, look for the key ideas, connect those ideas with other sentences, and see if there is a sentence that is quite distinctive in nature or something that is drastically out of place in terms of those key ideas, and that will become odd one out. Or maybe if we can link two sentences, then we know these two sentences cannot be odd one out. These two sentences cannot be odd one. Whatever is left could be the part of odd one out. So while solving the question of odd one out, you should talk about either it should be different theme. Theme is altogether different. In some of the question we saw, there was a perspective. The theme was by and large same, but perspective was different. Maybe four sentences talking about book, one was talking about author. So precisely it becomes a different perspective, right? So these were two things that would help us to solve the question of odd one out. In Parajumble, it's all about reading the sentence carefully, then try to connect the dots. If there are some visible grammatical clues like pronouns or conjunction, that would make our job a little easy, but it may not always be so. So maybe think about general to specific. If a sentence is general in nature, should come first. specific or examples are given, then it should follow that idea. So there were a few questions where we're focusing that this is a more general sentence, this is more specific, or it is elaborating. So maybe the sentence that is elaborating will come later part, and the sentence with general idea would come first. So that's how we were trying to link the sentences. And so the questions we could figure out that this could be the concluding sentence, because after this we can't bring any other idea or any other sentence. And so the questions we could figure out the introductory sentence. It's all about reading carefully and then try to connect the sentence either based on the ideas or based on some what we say grammatical links. So there could be grammatical connection or there could be semantics or idea based connections. That is what we should do. And stay relaxed and calm during solving the question, read it carefully and bring some element of logic, because when cat would design parajumble or odd one out question, I think logic will prevail language, though language plays a vital role, but there would be logic to figure out an answer. Just focus on getting that logic. The moment you're confused, think from an examiner's perspective. Try to analyze or read those options, rather read those sentences very, very carefully where you're figuring out which one should come first or last. But you cannot devote more than 2 minutes on a question. The moment you figure out that you are confused, it's better to move to the next question. Maybe later on you can come back to the same question. So follow that strategy. That will help you. Now, if you have any question, you're most welcome. Otherwise, that's all for today from my side. Please give 2, 3 more marks. Like you can give one mark today, one mark tomorrow. You should give a last mark on Friday. And after that, but have a very deep sleep. Right. And moreover, I would say is one more thing, take your test in the similar slot. And the third thing is don't eat in that time slot anything. Like try to adjust and accommodate your body as per the test time. That would help you to optimize your performance. So that's all for today. Wish you all the best. One more announcement, please. Your submit your admit card to Sulabh sir or ma'am, all the student, so that later on your GDPI process or test for other you find it quite smoothly. That's all from my side. Thank you. Bye bye. Take care.